What's good, everybody? This is Scoobert Dubert with Love Music More, and I am joined with Ryan Haft, who we are going to be talking about audio engineering, recording, talking with bands, building studios, all sorts of awesome stuff, including some live sound too. So, how are you doing, Ryan?
Good.
Great to meet you.
You as well.
So
Good day.
you're in this new studio space. You just gave me like kind of a 360 tour before we started recording. Um, what prompted you to have to make this move? I feel like it's like a very relatable music story, like recording story.
Right. Yeah, I guess we were chatting about it a little bit, but I can give the full story. Is
Yeah.
that I was in a space. I'm in Miami, Florida. I was in a space in North Miami that I guess in town is kind of known as like Studio Central. There's like Criteria Studios is over there where the Bee Gees made famous. There's a big documentary on it, I think on HBO or something like that. But
Right.
I was in that area, and I've kind of worked in that area since I guess I started getting into this. I worked at another studio up there called the Dungeon for a long time, which is now defunct. That was kind of like the rock and roll studio in Miami.
Cool.
But I
Yeah.
was there for a long time, 4 or 5 years, and kind of smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. Even there wasn't a lot going on. They put like a CrossFit gym
Yeah.
in next to us,
Ah.
and like we we noticed he was moving in, and we kind
Mm-hmm.
of all he had kind of done is like painted the walls black, like just cement walls.
Uh-huh.
We were like, hey man, like I went to the leasing office and we were like, hey, look, like this isn't gonna work.
Yeah.
And they kind of were like, there is one other space, like we'll give it to him for the same price, like whatever. And we approached the dude like, hey man, like this isn't gonna work. Like, can you move over to this other space? Like we'll paint the walls black for you, like
Yeah.
we'll do
Yeah.
all this stuff. And he straight up was just like, nah, I'm good. Like, nah, I'm straight. And like just
Ugh.
literally didn't give a shit.
Ugh.
And then, drops weights and
Yeah.
playing music over a PA the whole time.
So you're like trying to record. You're like on an acoustic guitar and you've got like a 45-pound weight like clanging next door and yeah, PA music. What a freaking
Yeah, it
nightmare.
was just if you tried to do anything delicate,
Yep.
like
Yep.
like a vocal with a condenser mic, or yeah, any
Yes.
acoustic guitar, like between the hours of basically like 11 and 7 p.m., just like wouldn't work. If I was doing like cranked up guitars or like
Mm-hmm.
loud drums, like you'd get away with it.
Yeah.
I should add that this space was built out, I think, in the 90s. I believe originally it was this studio called Tapeworm, and that somebody moved on from it, and it was just a built out recording studio in these warehouses space. So we had
Yes.
taken it over, so we didn't do the initial build out.
Yes.
And for years it was fine, and then come to find out with the gym next door, like, oh yeah, there's nothing on the other side of these walls
Right.
between the other space. And yeah, so that led us to like, all right, we either retrofit this space for a ton of money and like hope it works, like float a room inside of a room
Mm-hmm.
situation, or it was like, maybe we just move from this area and just start from scratch, like have a
Yeah.
chance to like truly design between the rooms and stuff.
And I think that's really
Um,
interesting. Like you have now, yeah, obviously it's hard. I mean, even me, like with my little home studio behind me, I'm going through it, just trying to be like, okay, I'll put a panel over here. It's like, wow, these things are expensive. This is I gotta get a rug. All the little things.
dude,
Can only
yeah,
imagine what it's like to be actually on the commercial level recording space. So, but you also have the added benefit of now you can design it the way you want and for your needs. So, could you talk about kind of like what what was the light bulb moment? It's like, hey, we're gonna do it on our own, and then how are we going to make it ours, like our dream space?
yeah. I mean, well, like I guess from the other space, so it's me and like a couple guys that share this space. So, and the other space was basically just control room, live room. That was it.
Okay, cool.
Bathroom,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So we were like, all right, like if we move to another space, like how can we increase the efficiency of the spot? So like the idea with the design in this place is I'm in the big control room right now, but like across the hall there's a small control room,
Oh, cool.
and both of them look out at the same live room. So
Neat.
we have two control rooms that both face the live room. So like one room could be mixing, one room could be tracking, both rooms could be
Cool.
mixing.
That's a
It
really cool
allows at
idea.
least like two things to cohabitate at once. Like,
Yes.
so that was one. And then yeah, I guess I don't know, just ergonomics of like, I guess the other space had a very large control room, and everybody got real comfortable with that. So this room is like a nice, comfortable size. You could fit like several people in here and not feel like you're all sitting on top of each other.
And I think
Um,
that's kind of rare nowadays because there's so many places that are being built as like production spaces. Like even my home studio is kind of like that, where it's like it's not particularly comfortable for an entire team to come through or a whole band. And I feel like with the music that you're making, it's critical to be able to have the entire band in listening to what you're tracking, even if they're not participating in the tracking, but like just being able to give their input, being able to create that like collaborative space that I feel like that really works with the kind of music that you're making.
yeah, totally.
And you have a million bathrooms.
Yeah, we did. It was garage sale and toilets when we first started on this spot. I guess I had told you that. Yeah,
Yeah.
the bare space came with like four bathrooms in it. It was like I think the space was used as like a underground church at some point. So
That's awesome.
lots of shitters.
And I feel like a lot of people don't realize kind of the care and science and the art that goes into like building a creative space where you have, on the one hand, you want it to sound great, and then on the other, you want it to feel great. How did you kind of navigate that? Like putting up panels, choosing colors, making it feel like a creative space, but also, checking all of the boxes acoustically.
I mean, at first, like the design, the layout kind
Yeah.
of started as like I kind of just sketched out something on paper and
Cool.
just kind of put like some of the studio 101 stuff down. Like, all
Hmm.
right, like let's not do parallel walls and that type
What
of thing. Try to like
what
not have
what
parallel walls.
just in case if people don't understand, this stuff, maybe they're just a bedroom producer or not even just a music fan. Why no parallel walls? Why is that like bullet point number one of what you're going to avoid when you're building your space?
I mean, I'm not like super knowledgeable
No,
about
it's
it,
cool.
but like the idea is just as sound comes off speakers, it's going to reflect off of surfaces, right? And the idea of like skewing walls a little bit allows like for sound. I mean, it'd be the same way of like light hitting a mirror, I guess,
Cool,
similar.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
as as sound like hits one wall, it's going to ricochet off of it, and you're trying to avoid it ricocheting back to your ears. So you to not color the source coming out of the speakers from early reflections, right? So the idea is to like sound hit walls, then scatter into a different direction, and then the second step is like adding absorption stuff to kind of like grab it and hold it down.
Cool. Yeah, and just like you
Same
were.
in the live room and control room, same kind of concepts.
Yeah, that's an interesting point we could dig into a little bit. But you were talking about behind you, you're gonna put in a huge diffusion panel, and you said how many
Yeah,
pieces of wood did you say you have out?
man, I don't know. Like we were originally on the tip of just buying, buying them.
Yeah,
There's all these companies that make them, GIK and stuff like that.
right,
But
right,
my other partner was like, I think it's going to be better if we do it custom.
cool.
And he convinced me somehow. So we actually got a hold of a program that we're going to do like a QRD
Oh,
style
cool,
diffuser,
nice, awesome.
and we found a program that like we could kind of put in the dimensions that we want, and it would sort of spit out like how many wells it's supposed to have and the depths of the wells. And it turned out to be like every little well is going to be 1 inch, and this thing is like I don't know, 12 feet long
Oh
by
my
like eight
God,
feet high. So like
awesome.
it's a ton.
That's awesome.
And yes, we have it all cut. We still need to just
Cool.
like stain it to kind
Yep.
of match some of the stuff that's in here and then assemble it.
Yep, glue that stuff on. So yeah, just for people that might be familiar. So like what we were talking about with the parallel walls, this is that to the, nth degree of all of these little tiny reflection surfaces that you create. And the beauty of what you're doing is you actually did it mathematically. Most people don't realize that there is like a mathematical formula to being able to diffuse the sound around the room rather than just having like a bookshelf or or just some
Yeah, I
random
mean, but
bits of wood.
a bookshelf would kind of do a kick-ass job too.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, we did some of the math on it,
Uh-huh.
but like by no means like
Yeah.
is this place like mathematically perfect? Like if a true designer were to like
That's
spec it
part of the
out, but
magic though, right? Like sometimes, I mean, if everything was mathematically perfect, then every studio would kind of sound the same or whatever. I mean, I feel like part of the
but
mojo of a place
I've
is like,
listened, I read
yeah,
interviews and I've
yeah,
in stuff with people and like people that are even still mixing. I mean, even studio designers that are
yeah.
mathematically on paper, these rooms are built and should spit out whatever frequency response, like perfectly flat. Like it never fucking does. Like even these
Yeah.
like super
Yeah.
expensive rooms, like these guys end up still using like DSP on their speakers to like do some correction and stuff. Like
Yeah.
so, I mean, I don't know. I've always kind of worked in whatever, no mathematically perfect room like
Yeah.
my entire career, and like I assume most engineers are working in suboptimal spaces. You know, you work
Hmm.
on them, but like
Hmm.
there's quirky stuff to all of these rooms, to every room you work in. You know what I mean? And like great, great products come out of these things. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Well, that's
there's
part
something
of.
like your
Uh-huh.
brain just kind of fills in the gaps of things that are weird in the room. You get used to it and you just learn what's weird about it or
Yeah, and I mean
stuff like
every
that.
like every part of the chain, like you learn what's weird about certain speakers because every speaker is a little bit different. You learn what's different
Right.
about different headphones or different microphones. All of these kind of things you almost learn just by osmosis and being around it. And then one of the things I notice a lot of mixing engineers, especially they're going into a new room, they'll listen down to a bunch of mixes they know super, super well, and then they'll kind of in their head create that delta of this is what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
should
You
sound like. This
hear
is what it does sound like.
yeah, like in this space, like oh yeah, there's like extra low end or like oh the mid
Yeah,
range is like kind of poking out a little bit here. Like yeah, I mean that's a good way to adapt yourself to a space you're not like completely comfortable with.
very cool. I like that a lot. In terms of differences between how you're treating the live room versus the control room, would just be curious just to kind of share with listeners or with me really. Like what do you think? What do you think? Like what was your philosophical kind of difference there? More diffusion and open in the live room, or did you try to keep everything pretty dead so you could do more stuff in the box? Or what was your plan there?
My preference for it
Hmm.
was the live room was to like try to like try to keep it as live as I could. I
Cool.
mean,
I love it.
I like the rooms to sound live, and I have like
Yeah.
some rolling gobos and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel yeah, you want something to sound dead, you can just surround it by a bunch of things and build
Yeah.
like a blanket fort above the drum kit or whatever if you really
Yes.
want to do that.
Exactly.
I think it's easier to do that than I mean, you
Make
can
it.
obviously you can create live stuff with reverbs and stuff like that, but to me, it's hard to fake. I mean, it sounds fine, but like there's nothing like the actual space being activated, right? So we
Hmm.
wanted to kind of, I wanted to keep it as open as I could without it being like harsh and
Yeah, like a
like
garage.
just tuning it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of tuning it, right? So we
Cool.
threw up some stuff, some diffusion and some like some not broadband, but like basically kind of like mid range absorption stuff to just try
Okay.
to control the garagey
Yeah.
sounding things because
Yeah.
this was just there. It is unparalleled walls in there, but
Hmm.
with no treatment, it still kind of sounds like a warehouse or a
Yeah.
garage or
Right.
something. So
Yeah. I mean, it's that sound when people move into a new place, like picture your
absolutely,
apartment or
yeah.
whatever when you walk in for the first time and it's just like, wow, this feels tough to live in. Or like a really brutal restaurant where you hear everybody's conversation all at once.
Oh yeah.
Just
Even
stressful.
like you say, when you move into a place and there's no furniture in it, you like
Yes.
clap and you're like, holy
Ugh.
shit. And then as soon as you throw like a carpet down and a
Uh-huh.
couch and some stuff around, you're like, all right, this doesn't feel like, I'm in a I'm in a garage or a warehouse or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, we started it like kind of with sort of with nothing. I did like some drums and then
Hmm.
I was like, all right, like I was like, okay, there's some harsh stuff in like in the upper mid range. So we got like a skyline diffuser on one wall, and then we started adding some stuff on the ceiling that you kind of see
Yeah, I
back
see it. I see it
there.
back
And
there. Yeah.
yeah, and it started to like tighten it up a little bit, but it hasn't fully like removed like the life from it. So
Cool. I love that. I love
for
that.
now, feels all right. I'm sure like I don't know, in a couple months after doing some more stuff, I'll be like, all right, we should change one thing or maybe take some
Mhm.
stuff off the wall or
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It'll probably like be an endless trial and error situation.
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel like that's the life of the engineer is just you solve one problem, you discover the next, or just like the little things like, oh, this channel strip just isn't working today. Just
Yeah,
you constantly uncovering like the next thing that you have to do on your to-do list is like linear problem solving.
yeah, that and like I mean, in a weird way, taste too. Like right now, I'm like, yeah, like
Cool.
I want it
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
Like I guess I'll have the option. Like I get on these tips where I'm like, yeah, I want this super tight drums, and then
Hmm.
maybe I'll be like, we need to put up more diffusion or we need to put up more absorption on these walls.
Yes.
So
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good
we'll
point.
see.
Yeah.
It'll be a process, but
Yeah. But I love that. I don't know, just providing yourself that flexibility and like trusting those instincts and trusting that you'll get there when you get there. I think all of those are really good lessons because a lot of engineers, especially when you're building your first space or building your first home studio, the impulse is to do everything at the same time because like anything short, you're doing it. So like anything short of it being perfect is a failure or whatever. It's like no, even top of the line commercial recording spaces are have incremental change.
Yeah, and I just think, I mean, I think if you're going to be working in a space like
Hmm.
all the time,
Yeah.
like you said, like you kind of need to learn it a little bit. Like you need to spend some time in
Ooh,
here to realize like, all right, this is something that actually needs to change, or this is something like we should modify, right? So
that's a good point. Yeah.
I think it takes a little time to like actually come to those conclusions. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
obviously just sit in here and run like a measurement test, and
Yeah.
then whatever the math says, but
Feel like you're saying the math.
aside from the math, I think
Right.
you can tweak things to your preference, right?
Yeah. I mean, if everything was all math, then it would in that way, then it would just anybody could do it because you just bring the measurements and it's done. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's not there are these missing elements. It's like when people say like music is math or whatever. It's like I don't know. You're kind of missing the whole point. Sure,
The
parts of it
magic,
are the magic.
the magic's the thing that you
Yeah.
can't do on the calculator, right? So
Yes. On
just
that point,
moving stuff
I
around till
I
the
really
magic
wanted to
happens.
I want to talk to you about outboard gear because I know that this is always a hot debate with music, just fans, and then creators. And obviously, there are budget issues to have a real LA2A versus the UAD LA2A. Would just love to kind of like hear your perspective on you have some awesome outboard gear. I was checking out your website, the magic and the mojo of outboard versus in the box and when you kind of reach for one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could bring it back for a long time. I
Yeah.
was the first studio I mentioned that I worked at called the Dungeon was like a full analog spot,
Cool.
SSLs, outboard
Yeah.
gear, tape machines.
Uh-huh.
I kind of came up using all that stuff, and I guess maybe I somewhere deep down I always wanted to believe that that stuff sounded better, and for a long
Okay.
time it did.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believed it did. It had the thing, it had the magic, right? Like
Hmm.
I had the sauce. Um, I think now we're in a period of time where plugins have leveled the playing field pretty drastically.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean it's impressive. I do actually do a lot of mixing in the box
Hmm.
somewhat these days, even though I am sitting in front of a big
Uh-huh.
SSL. I do like to mix on it, but
Yeah.
I do heavily use all of this outboard gear that's here in the studio
Hmm.
in the tracking phase. I do see that not being replaceable.
Cool.
So the way I like to work is I do like
Yeah.
to kind of grab sounds the way I think they should sound, or
Okay.
way or the band or the artist thinks
Yeah.
they should sound on the way in,
Yeah.
right? So like if it should be brighter, it should be punchier, or it should be distorted to all shit.
Yeah.
I like to at least like aim at that
Yeah.
on the
For
way
sure.
in. And the outboard gear, you can push it
Yes.
far.
Yes.
You can dime the knobs and things still sound like pleasing. Where
Hmm.
you start doing that stuff in plugins, and you start to reach the upper limitations of what the plugins can do or what they modeled appropriately, right?
Right.
I
And
know a lot of guys.
that's a
I
really good
implement
point. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah,
Continue.
plugins like I implement it. I mean, I've listened to some interviews like Chad Blake talking about it that
Hmm.
like he tries to think of plugins as not outboard gear, but like as just like a new tool. Even
Okay.
though the picture
Okay.
of an LA2A, like,
Yeah. It's
is
the
it
same.
really an
Yeah.
LA2A?
Uh-huh.
It's not exactly
Mm.
the same, but it is a new tool. So you just, you have to figure out ways that you can get things out of plugins a different way than you would out of outboard gear. Like 1176 is like outboard ones, like, you could just smash them and they sound
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Totally.
The plugins, like you totally smash them and they start to get kind of brittly and harsh.
Hmm. Hmm.
But what a lot of people do workarounds is like, you use like three instances
Yep.
of a
That's what I do.
1176 plugin doing just like a little bit.
Hmm.
And it's like, it kind of gets you a closer result to like if you just took one hardware
Yeah.
1176 and just
Yes.
destroyed the shit out of the input or something like.
That's a good point. And yeah, and then like a lot of, I mean, it makes sense why that would be the case, right? Is like when you're driving these actual capacitors and these actual lines,
And transformers and shit. Yeah.
transformers. Yeah, it's like that. That makes sense that that would be able to impart a sound that would be super, super hard to capture. And like there's some approximations, like I like a black box. There's this thing like True Iron by Kazrog that's pretty cool. That's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. I
transformer
have both of those.
distortion.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're cool. But yeah, they're not quite that thing, but they are enough of that thing that if you need to add like 20%, you can. So it's a
Right.
really good point. Like if you're getting the sound that you want in the actual tracking phase, and then you need to add an extra 20%, it's like, hey, the plugin's got your back. But if you
Absolutely.
need to
Yeah.
add 100%, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if you're gonna get there.
It gets a little tricky. And if I
Yeah.
get sent, I mean, it happens. I get sent things that like
Hmm.
I do need to get about 80% of it back, and I
Yeah.
will send out.
Yeah.
I will treat it like, all right, I am going to retrack these
I'm recording
files.
this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
will send it out to like a plethora of outboard stuff and like tweak it till like I'm like, this is what it maybe should have sounded like at my tracking stage, and then
Yes.
print it back in and keep that as my starting point. Like,
Yep.
so I kind
I,
of capture some of that stuff, and then I go into like the mixing
I
portion of
think
it where I,
that's like a really interesting, not all mixing engineers think like that, but I think the ones that do are the ones that really, really crush it, where they like look at it, go, okay, I would have tracked that differently. Let's reamp it. Like I do that sometimes with guitars. If somebody sends me a really crappy line in signal,
yeah,
send
send
that
it
to
back
my
out.
tube amp, send it right back in. It's like great. It's like we just had a nice tracking session and worked on the tone together instead of like grinding away for 3 hours trying to get 15 plugins to do the job. It's like I've got an amp. I'm just gonna throw it in the amp. It's gonna take
Yeah,
me
yeah. Anytime
30 minutes.
like yeah, like anytime I end up on a track and then
Yeah.
like I end up I use the Fab Filter Pro Q a decent
Yep.
amount for surgicals. Anytime I end
Sure.
up with like this EQ curve that's like
Yes. Right.
looks like this, trying to like make it just sound like even,
Yeah.
that's when I'm kind of like, all right, like I got to do something else to like make this
Exactly.
work, you know?
Exactly.
Like the EQ curve should not have to look like that to have just like an electric guitar sound, right? So
Yep. Yep. I
usually
totally.
then it's like, all right, let me just send it out through something. Like I have a
Yeah.
tape machine here. Sometimes I'll hit
Cool.
it to like one of
Yes.
the tracks on one of the tape machines. And
Perfect.
usually like you could start taming the weird stuff that sounded bad, and then you can end up with just like a normal EQ on your track to mix. Like,
That was a really hard thing for me when I was doing my first mixes because I thought like because I would use the presets or whatever and I thought that like EQs had to be really drastic and then like the more I actually just would be in a studio with somebody and be like, oh, you're just using like a shelf. It's like, oh,
yeah,
like okay.
yeah. I mean, that's been like a, I mean, it's an ever
Yeah.
ongoing thing forever, right? And I mean, I will do like some extreme shit if it
Hmm.
has to be done.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. I've had a lot of friends coming up that like would be afraid to like yeah put the high shelf 10
Hmm.
dB. They're like
Yeah.
10 dB, like that's
Yeah.
crazy. I'm like, dude, just close your eyes and turn it up. If it sounds good, it sounds good. So
Love it.
sometimes you do just got to
Yes.
close your eyes
Yes.
and make some crazy ass EQ move to work. But like more and more now, I've learned that it's like I think what you kind of just said is like yeah, like you're like, you know what, it could be a little brighter. I just need a little bit of a high shelf on one thing, and that's it. I
Yeah.
don't need to use the other. I don't need to use the other four bands of the EQ.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
plugin that I've been really liking by Good Hertz called Tilt Shift. And it's literally
Tilt
just
shift.
it just does this or this. And
Right. Yeah.
it's like the tone knob on Decapitator basically. But
Right.
just a little more hi-fi. And it's great because it prevents me from doing too much because I just go, "Oh, this just needs to be brighter, dB and a half." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. It's sitting now. I'm going to
Yeah.
step away." But like
Brighter,
before, I'd be
darker.
like, like, oh, I get the presence like here, like, oh, really tight Q, which is like a little tight band for listeners. And it then at the end of it all, I'd be like, oh, this sounds like thin or really bright or just weird. It doesn't sound like the instrument anymore. It became this other weird thing. Uh, like
Yeah, and
my
it's weird. It's like
yeah.
you could do some crazy EQ move like that
Yeah.
with like valleys and peaks and mountains and all kinds of things, and then you like bypass that and then go to like the other one where you just do the tilt. You're like just a
Yeah.
bit brighter, and then go back
Yeah.
and forth, and you're like just a bit brighter totally worked. I didn't need to
Yeah.
squeeze all these peaks into this thing. Like,
Right. Especially because like I don't know. I had a problem when I wasn't mixing and I was just in a band and just sending it to mixing engineers is they would send me back stuff and I'd be like, that doesn't sound like the instrument anymore. Like either they sound replaced the drums or like they did something so drastically tonally to something that it's like, hey, that's not what I delivered you. I want like the
you just
song.
wanted like an enhanced version of that, but not
Yeah,
a
like
completely different version
I
of that.
wanted like I wanted a mix of the arrangement that I provided rather than like like, oh, this is like a different thing now. Not saying that I like wanted the mixing engineer to not be creative. It's like just saying like, hey, like maybe don't uh sound replace everything or put it into this like box or your set of presets. Like let the song become the best version of itself.
Do its thing.
Yeah.
But I guess I can guess that
Uh-huh.
those experiences are what led you into
Yeah,
doing it yourself.
exactly. So it's
Yep.
it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, yep. I have the same. I mean, that's
Really?
how I got into this too. Yeah, same
Please,
story.
I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
how'd you come up? How'd you decide to be on the side of the glass? How did that happen?
I just, I mean, it's a similar thing to you that you just said.
Cool.
Like
Cool.
I played in plenty of bands. We would do some recordings, and they kind of would never really come out how I imagined or
Yep.
wanted.
Yep.
And I didn't have, I guess, I didn't have the like the engineering vocabulary
No, of
to
course not.
like say what I wanted. Right.
Right.
I just like it should be brighter,
Hmm.
heavier, whatever. But
Yeah.
so yeah, at some point I just was like, all right, I'm gonna buy. I think I bought a Digi 002 and I bought like
Nice.
557s and maybe a 1421. It was like a
Perfect.
birthday present to myself, I think when
Yeah.
I was fucking 21 or 22 or something like that.
Hmm.
And the band I was playing in at the time, I was like, all right, I'm gonna record whatever, however many songs we've got right now.
Hmm.
And just do it. Just start to do it and just, you know, tweak, plugins.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just started doing it, and then here and there, like a buddy's band would just be like, like that kind of came out cool. Like, could we do our
Yes.
little
Yes.
demo? And yeah, did some people's demos, and then things started getting better, and I
Hmm.
was able to like charge a little bit of money, and then I got lucky, and I actually the studio that I mentioned, the dungeon where I
Hmm.
kind of got my first start, I straight up just kind of emailed them, and was like, hey, I record bands like in my living room, like I'd love to like maybe come by and like help out or
Cool.
whatever. And
Yeah.
I got kind of lucky that the owner, Fred,
Hmm.
at that time, I think had a another young
Cool.
daughter, and he was just like, dude, I need somebody here to help me. Like,
Hmm.
just perfect, real, just
Great.
right place, right time thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he brought me in. I was there for like I don't know, a week maybe, and he realized like I knew how to record bands already, and he just gave
Cool.
me the key and was like, all right, cool, yeah, you work here. Like,
Awesome.
and then yeah, from there, I just
Hmm.
I started just collecting gear, kind of,
Yeah.
and then
Right.
eventually at some point I was like, yeah, like I have enough stuff that maybe I don't need to work at this place.
Yeah.
And then so I opened up a studio in a house with a partner, my buddy John, who plays in this band Torche. He's also a great engineer. So we kind of partnered together and put
Cool.
both of our collections of gear together, and like had
Yeah.
this sweet house that had like a huge live room and a control
Awesome.
room kind of.
Awesome. Yeah.
And did that for a long time, and
Hmm.
then I ended up moving into the space that was demised by the CrossFit gym. And then after that, I'm built this place, and
Yeah,
I'm
man.
here now.
Awesome. Awesome. So that's a really cool thing because I was gonna ask you this question because I get this a lot of like how does somebody start finding bands to record or like working in that and that you kind of answered that but feel free to expand on it but just like being in the scene recording your own stuff showing
Yeah,
up
yeah,
doing a good
yeah,
job finding your network like
yeah, yeah.
that's
I
cool.
mean, for
Yeah.
me, I guess maybe I don't know. I don't know if it's luck or it was just
Yeah,
situational,
everybody's got
but
their
it
own
was. It
journey.
was.
Yeah.
But it was like, yeah, I played in bands. Like I constantly was playing in bands and playing shows with other bands. So like I sort of had a network of like local bands and bands that I was friends
Cool.
with and bands
Yes.
that like. And eventually it expanded to like bands that like we would tour with and
Right. Yes. That makes
things like
sense.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was just being out, meeting bands, seeing bands, talking to people, and then eventually, like, you record some bands, and then their buddy's band is like, "Who did that?" And they're like, "Oh, this guy did it." Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I did it forever. Like, I made a website, that I sent
Hmm.
you, but like, I
Yeah,
did
that's
that like
awesome.
I don't know, 2 years ago,
Cool.
because my girlfriend was kind of just like, "You fucking need to have this," and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess you're right." So
Yes.
I made one, and it was like fun to make it or whatever, but
Uh-huh.
up until then, like I didn't advertise at all. Really, it was
Yeah.
like everything was just always word of mouth, and
Yeah.
it sort of still is. Like,
Hmm.
but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just being involved with the local music scene, just music scene in general. Like, that is what led me to finding new bands to record, and like, yeah,
Mhm.
just every single time trying to do a good job, trying to make every recording I do better than the last one or the best one I've ever done this time. And,
Yeah.
you know, just trying to do a good job. I mean, I love doing it. So
Mhm.
that's not, that's not a stretch to do, but,
Yeah.
um,
Have you found that the love has like increased the more you've done it? Or has it just been kind of this constant thing? Have you had any peaks and valleys with kind of your relationship to recording production?
yeah, I guess there are some peaks and valleys.
Hmm.
I still very much enjoy it because it is not the same every single day.
Yeah.
Every single
Yeah.
recording you do, like I'm not a big proponent of like sound replacing things
Hmm.
and like using tons of sample stuff. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
every
Yes.
time I record a drum set, like it sounds fucking different than the last time I recorded a drum
Cool.
set. And like
Yep.
same with the guitar amps. Like I don't really, sometimes they sound kind of cool, but I try to mic guitar amps and not
Yeah.
use, you know, modeled stuff.
Hmm.
So having that different every time, like keeps it exciting to me.
Yes. Yes. And then how do you like keep your approach different? Is it just by, just listening and being like, okay, no, this would go well in this sequence, or like reevaluating your chains, or kind of approaching things? Like how do you keep it so that you're not feeling on your side like you're being too templated, or you're always running the guitars through a SM57, like et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know. I guess I have I've in the past had a problem with like gear, like where like
Okay.
I just
Yes.
lust for like different gear and stuff
Uh-huh.
like that. And I think I chase the same thing with sounds in a way
Okay.
where
Okay. Yeah, I get that.
like if I recorded a guitar with a 57 and a 421 last time, like this next time I'm like, you know what, like maybe we should try like a condenser and this other
Hmm.
thing, like
Hmm.
let's see if like that's a good combination.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm guilty of like maybe experimenting a little bit on the clock. I'll be like, let's try this other weird chain or sequence of mics.
Uh-huh.
Because to me, it's like you throw it up, and if like some magical thing happens, you're like, damn, that's fucking sick. Like I can keep
Yeah.
note of that.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work, then like it takes like 2 seconds to just like switch a mic and put the 57 back, which
Right.
works.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I
You
mean?
you have your bag,
So
and so might as well keep exploring, and you might find the thing that like makes that record it, like, that is that
totally.
magic.
And
Yeah.
like, and I think maybe either I attract it
Uh-huh.
or I don't know, like I choose to work with certain bands that I feel are like open to that type of thing.
Cool. Yes.
Like
Yes.
yo, let's throw a drum room mic in the garbage can and
Yeah, cool.
whatever. Could
Uh-huh.
like just
Exactly.
yeah, like weird,
Exactly.
goofy stuff like that. But I think it excites people. Like, oh yeah, like what the fuck was that gonna sound like? I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like let's do it.
Uh-huh.
And then maybe it sucks. Maybe it doesn't work, but you're like, all right,
Right.
well, we'll just mute that. But
There's
I
also
think
I
it I
don't
think it makes it exciting for everybody to
it
like try
does.
things that are like weird. Like
Well, that energy is infectious too. Like, um, one of my favorite things with miking drums is like putting I know a lot of people do this, but putting like basically a microphone pointed right at their groin, like
yeah,
over
crotch mic.
crotch mic, and that like seeing drummers change the way they play when I, crank that thing a little bit, like run into the stressor or something, or just like get that and
Yeah,
blend
yeah.
that in so it doesn't sound anymore like they're just playing like sterile close mic, to like now they have some energy.
Yeah, they have this.
Just
There's like a little pumping
yeah,
thing
push
happening.
pull thing, and now they're hitting the drums differently, and it's like those kind of things are really interesting, how they are infectious in terms of just the performance on the other side of the glass, of like
Right, right, right.
if you're
I
exploring on this
listened.
side, you'll explore on that side. Yeah.
I can't remember if I read it or maybe I heard it in a different podcast, but somebody was mentioning like that mic, like taking the crotch mic and
Yeah.
like sending just that
Okay.
signal to the drummer when they're
Okay.
playing. Like you don't
Cool.
give them the kick, snare, and the other thing. You send them just that
Just that.
because that microphone
Uh-huh.
has its own balance, right? It has its own balance of kick, snare,
Yes.
cymbals,
Right.
and like and psychologically, like if they're hearing like, oh, like there's too much hi-hat happening in this one microphone that they're hearing,
Oh, yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
start to like chill out on the hi-hat and maybe
Right.
just play harder on the kick and snare, and
Yes.
like feet like the headphone mix can kind of like
That's so true.
change people's performances.
That's so true. I do that a lot with my vocals. Is like playing with the level at which my voice is cutting through or being buried by the mix, and then also like the level of my headphones. Like if it's like really loud, I'm gonna sing differently. even
You
if
sing
my vocal,
quieter. Yeah, like
yeah, it's just like that give and take of all those variables. It fundamentally changes how you approach performance, even just subconsciously.
yeah.
React.
I had never really thought about it on the drumming side of that till like
Yeah,
I heard
right.
somebody talk about it, but I've always
Hmm.
kind of been hip to that idea with vocals. I'm like, if I need these
Yeah.
vocalers to like push it a little harder, like I'll just send them a little less of themselves. So
Yes.
they gotta give more to hear it, right? So
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And it's also funny because it like if you hear yourself less, you end up singing a little bit more like you do when you're live because you don't hear yourself
right,
super well a lot of times, especially if you're a more up and coming band. You got monitor mixes and no in ears or anything like that. Like
right, totally,
kind of used to like pushing it. But then when it's super intimate, yeah, you can like kind of back off the mic and be scared. Uh, yeah,
totally.
interesting. Like the psychoacoustics or whatever the
It's like psychology of recording, right?
psychology of
Like
recording.
that's
Yeah,
like I guess that's producer stuff, right? Like just
that
like
is.
weird tricks that you don't even have to tell anyone to like coax
Yes,
them to like
right.
perform better. Like
Yeah, some Jedi mind trick kind of Zen master stuff of yeah, just turn this knob a little bit and you're gonna react to it differently.
yeah, I turn you down, you'll sing a little louder, and everything's
Hmm.
gonna be good.
Yeah, love that. Exactly. Yeah, and I love that idea of applying that to drums too, especially because it's so difficult. I think that was the scariest thing to me when I started approaching like live recordings with drummers, especially in the beginning, because I think I over mic'd, which is a natural thing that most people do when they're starting up, is just put a mic on everything.
That's
Uh,
still over, Mike.
I mean, it's fun, but like, especially in the beginning, I think it's like it's really hard to be like, okay, now I'm like dealing with 32 channels all at once, and I'm like a new engineer or whatever. It's like, oh my God,
A
that's
lot
a
to manage. Yeah,
lot to manage.
it's still. I mean, it's still a lot to manage.
Yeah, totally, totally. I so like I felt like liberated when I started miking the drum kit less, and then from there I was able to mic it more again. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Every now and
Streamline.
then, like I get sent something that's like somebody had just like kick in, snare top,
Uh-huh.
tom tom, overhead, overhead. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do the thing. And then like you start working on it, and you're like, man, this shit is just like the phase is way better, so it
Yeah.
sounds punchier,
Yeah.
and like yeah, like the less things that there are, like the more direct the sounds
Hmm.
feel, and the
For
phase
sure.
is better, and like
For sure.
sometimes it sounds better, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had kind of done a similar thing where I, whatever, 20 mics on the kit to like, you know what, like maybe I should just do kick, snare, tom, tom, overheads.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then, take it back from there and be like, all right, now
Right.
room mics, and we'll leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And
Lately, I've kind of landed in that.
uh
Like, I
cool.
just have that simple thing,
Yep.
and then a stereo room mic, and I limit myself to that.
I love it. And I like that too, because it's like, okay, here's my baseline. I know that if I don't have this, I'm gonna regret it. Now, what does that kit need? It's like, oh, it needs more gut from the snare. Okay, snare bottom. Like that. Those
Right.
kind of like you can react to the sound rather than just being like, here's my default miking setup.
What I always do. Yeah.
Yeah, like I own this many mics. I'm gonna use them all.
Yeah.
That kind
I
of
mean,
energy.
I try to keep in my head sometimes when I mic up a ton of stuff is like, I'll be like,
Yeah.
I'm going to cover a lot of bases.
Yeah.
And chances are, like, I'm going to mute a bunch of these fucking microphones. Like,
Yes.
I'm going
You
to start
have
pulling them up one by one and see what works. And then, like, I
you
don't
have to
need
have that.
all of these
You have to have that confidence though.
discipline.
Like, yeah, that discipline to be like, I
Yeah.
actually will.
To me, it's discipline because I've been guilty of
Yeah.
like, I recorded all 18 mics. All 18 mics need to make it into this balance. When like really just like pull two of them out and you're like, oh, everything is way more clear now. So like,
Yeah.
just keep it moving. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And allowing like trust and room for you to react to it. It's like I don't know. I think it was Andrew Sheps or something was talking about how it's so natural and native to put um high pass filters on everything other than like a kick drum. But he's like, sometimes the magic is in the weird floppy low end from the tom, and it's like just like reading and reacting, like allowing the sound, like you were saying with the mics on
yeah.
the guitar or whatever.
I
Like,
think I think I
yeah,
think I had maybe heard that
uh-huh.
interview or something before too, where I've had to like kind of consciously do that too because I got
Yeah.
into a habit of like
Oh, for sure, me too.
it
Absolutely.
doesn't nothing happens below 60 hertz, so peace
Uh-huh.
out.
Yeah,
But like
exactly.
sometimes like on guitar, if you just like
Yeah,
leave it
yeah.
open,
Right.
like there's a weird 20 hertz rumble happening on guitars, but if you get rid of it, like guitars don't sound as big. So
Yeah, yeah. That's a great point. I wanted to talk to you specifically about guitars. And because I was just listening to the EP that you just sent me over on Bandcamp, and just had the size of the guitars. And I was also looking at your website, and you're typing like make it loud. I'd love to like hear your principles of, making it loud, making things hit hard, making rock records, and like letting those guitars speak and have their space. So would just love to hear a little bit about kind of like how you approach that EP, and then also kind of how you approach that just in general.
It's maybe in general
Yeah,
works a little better. I mean, the
sure.
EP is
Yeah,
well, the EP was is my band that I play in,
cool.
which
Sounds
has
awesome.
its own demons to it.
Okay.
I mean, maybe you have it same
Yeah,
experience. Like
yeah,
recording
I
my
get
own
you.
stuff, like
Totally.
to me, it's almost easier to like work with other people's stuff
Uh-huh.
because
It's
I mean,
like
I'm
doctors don't
just
operate on themselves.
yeah, that's a fantastic analogy actually. Um, I have a hard time just being objective sometimes
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when it's
For
my own
sure.
stuff,
For
probably because
sure.
I've heard it so many times and whatever. But I guess maybe just the general ethos of the whole thing. Maybe it kind of stemmed from just records I liked that inspired me to even want to do this. That like just had big ass drums and like big
Yeah.
ass guitars, and I think maybe not a race, but like maybe it was just kind of like the thing we were pushing is the who I mentioned, my buddy John.
Yeah.
Um, we kind of came up doing this a lot together, and I feel like we both were like very much like trying to make recordings that like sounded like in front of the speakers and
Yes. Yes.
louder, 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 but
Uh-huh.
then like not fucked up, smushed loud,
Uh-huh.
like
Uh-huh.
loudness war stuff. But so yeah, I've kind of always tried to strive for these big, larger than life sounds, but still
Mhm.
kind of keep them natural sounding.
I love the in front of the speaker thing because I feel that too, where it's like some records you just feel like, even just on your phone sometimes, feels like it's like levitating up here. It's like,
Yeah,
how'd you pull that off? Where it's not
I
coming from the
mean,
source anymore. It's so cool.
yeah, like from what I guess I've learned now that like
Yeah.
it's what's the right word? It's like relative. Is it relative EQ? It's just like the kind of the way you EQ things,
Okay.
relative loudness, right? It's like
Relatively.
the
Yeah. Okay.
you
Yeah.
can try to EQ things in a way that like makes it feel loud, but like metering wise, like isn't any
Mm,
louder than
yeah.
something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the trick to like what you just said. Like it sounds like it's above your phone.
Uh-huh.
It's just like finding the right ways to make the mid range sit and make things jump out
Yes.
of the mix
Yes.
and like shit like that.
And all the saturation. I mean, like that's how we kind of began this conversation, was talking about all of the different outboard gear, and then also the plugins and stuff, and trying to coax that saturation, those transistors and stuff
Yeah,
to.
saturation in a way just kind of like it can like hold back transients
Cool.
without
Yeah.
it sounding like it's holding back
Cool.
transients.
Okay. That
Or
makes sense.
maybe it's I mean it's
For
the
people
idea
listening,
that
transient is like the attack and release, like the like that initial like impact, the that it's pushing into the microphone, just in case somebody doesn't know.
right, yeah. And we do it at like on a softer level, but like I mean
Hmm.
like a guitar amp, if
Yeah.
if you hear just a guitar direct in, it's just like
Hmm.
blank, blank, blank. It's like all
Yes.
transient, right? But as
Yeah.
soon as you
Right.
send it through through like a Marshall amp,
Hmm.
there's no more transients, but it's
Yeah.
just like ja 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 ja.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
it's doing a similar thing to like snare drums or vocals. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of like round the top of it off, and like it allows like the stuff behind it to kind of feel like it sits
Mm. It's a
more
good way to put it.
forward.
Right. It's a good way to put it.
And I
Yeah.
think
And
more now I'm more conscious of using saturation to do these things, where in the
cool.
past I think by just slamming stuff through outboard gear or
Right.
mixing on a console, those things
Yes.
were happening, and
Hmm.
I just kind of was rolling with it. You know, now I'm more like, okay, yeah, like I kind of now understand why
Yeah.
things are happening because I'm using these tools or techniques and things
Well, I
like that.
think that's like the difference between early digital and where we are now. It's not just the tools got better. Like obviously the tools got better, but it's also the engineers and stuff figured out how to use it and stack it and like have it do the
And
thing.
combine it.
Exactly. And like
Now,
that.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
everyone now knows that the marriage between the like dirty analog shit going into the digital recording is like what sounds good.
Yeah. Yes.
The real clean mic pre into the real clean digital DAW, kind of boring.
Right.
You know, the distorting tube Pultec shit on the before the DAW, like is what
Yeah.
sounds real nice.
Yes, exactly. It's that marriage, and then because then you get the beautiful combination. This is part of the reason why I think stuff sounds better now than it ever did. Is you have the combination of control and like harmonics, and having
Yeah,
both, you can do so much more
you
rather
can
than
you
just
can
kind of
pick
like
and
this is it.
choose.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, me and my one of my studio partners the other day were like
Mhm.
listening to a record, and like I was like, "Yo, this record sounds." I think it was a Mars Volta record. We put it on or
Uh-huh.
whatever, and he was like so surprised how like little low end there was
Mm.
in it. And this is,
Yeah,
this record was what 20 years ago,
yeah.
because he's like, man, like low end in records now is like
Mhm.
so big,
It's
and
huge.
it's because like playback systems can handle it now,
Yep, yep.
and like, and like on tape, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I guess you probably could push low end pretty hard, like on tape machines and through consoles and stuff. But I think like the capturing of it in the digital
Hmm.
environment, and then being able to like control it there
Yeah.
and hold it and allow it to get farther forward
Uh-huh.
in the blend of things, allows for records to just have like fucking huge low end.
And also, I mean, like delivery. I was talking to my grandpa about this, about like low end on vinyl, and how it was like harder in like the 60s and 70s to be able to be like, here's like a super bass heavy thing and not have the needle
Needle
jump out of
jump
the
out of
grooves.
the groove, right?
Yeah. So you have that. You have like
Yeah,
delivery
the
vehicles.
format allows you
The
to have
format
like
allows you, and we have like
different fidelity.
lossless fidelity formats like on Bandcamp. Like we'll drop your band's link into the bank for Bandcamp so people can hear it at full res. But like all that stuff that matters. Like you get more base information when you're dealing with lossless formats. And also I think that mastering has changed pretty drastically, and kind of like the ways that mastering engineers look at creating a finished product.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so. I
yeah.
mean, if you move from like the 90s into the
Yeah.
2000s, and then I mean, I guess like the 2000s was like everyone basically asking mastering engineers like, make this shit the loudest fucking thing
Yeah.
possible.
Yes.
Mostly for CDs, right? They were
Right.
like, they wanted like the
Yeah.
CD to be like the loudest fucking CD ever. And then I think it is obviously then now evolved that like most things are mastered headed towards just digital streaming.
Hmm.
I feel it's like digital streaming and vinyl, right? It's like
Yeah.
those are the kind of the two formats that are the most. I mean, streaming being the most popular by far,
Hmm.
obviously. Where like, yeah, the end product is different. It doesn't need to be
Yeah.
the loudest thing,
Uh-huh.
because a lot of the algorithms of like Spotify and all these things kind of just level.
Yep.
You can obviously turn that thing off, but I
Hmm.
assume most consumers just download
Dude,
Spotify and like and let it ride. And
most people leave it on low res. Drives me
yeah,
crazy. I go into my friend's car. I'm like, this sounds like crap. And I go on their settings. I'm like, you're kidding me? Even your downloaded stuff is not at like 320 MP3
you
level.
put it
Like,
yeah
ah,
put it at
killing me.
320, and then
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are probably just nerdy enough that like I go in and I take like the auto leveling thing
Same.
off. Like,
Same. Me too.
yeah, I
Absolutely.
want to hear it. Like, I want to hear it. Like, how was this made? Like, what
Yeah.
was what was what was the band and the whole process? Like, this is the finished thing. I want to hear that.
Exactly. Exactly. Totally agree. I
And
don't
like
mind
some
turning
of
it up
the
and down sometimes.
yeah. I have to like convince myself that like if I end up doing a recording that's like a
Hmm.
little bit quieter, but like the
Hmm.
transients jump more, and like, by lack of a better term, maybe like has more fidelity, but it's not as loud as like some other thing. Like I have to
Hmm.
convince myself, like, well, yeah, like you could just turn it up a little bit and it sounds sick.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Right.
but
And
like people chase the loud record thing,
Yeah, and
like
I understand why, and also the perceptual loudness kind of stuff that you were talking about. Like I understand that even more, and that's also a tricky thing. Like I've had some stuff, especially on streaming, that hit streaming that's maybe would be perceptually more quiet because there's like more bass, and sometimes the streaming doesn't hit the bass as hard. I don't know, some interesting things like that, but it's like it doesn't really
it's hard to
matter.
gauge. It's hard to gauge because I guess the codecs that the streaming services use to like
Yeah,
whether like penalize and turn it down or turn it
cool.
up, or like
Yeah,
are 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 from what I understand are based like
please.
over like a period of time on your
Hmm.
track, and it has a lot to do with like
Mm,
mid-range and
cool.
low end. So if
Yeah.
you have a song that's like loud, 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 and then the whole middle of the song ends up like really quiet and not like very mid-rangey, and it gets loud, 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 loud again, it may not get penalized that much because
Mm.
over the duration of the song, it didn't feel like there was a ton of like mid-range
Interesting. Okay.
material in it. But if you
Yeah.
have like like
Just
my
smash.
stuff or like whatever
Yeah.
rock stuff that's just straight mid range,
Yeah.
blaring as loud as it can through the whole thing.
Hmm.
It's like those types of things probably like absolutely get penalized. They're like, oh, we got to turn this thing down and
Yeah.
like normalize it or whatever.
Yeah. Which is why I think like something like Bandcamp is so cool to exist, and I highly encourage all music fans to check it out because it's like I know that audiophile people get on their high horse about lossless and all this kind of stuff, but that's the way that you can really hear it, the way that the band approved it, and
Yeah,
it'll
they
sound
put
good
the
on any
final thing
system.
there.
It's
Yeah,
this is it. Everything else is it's like when people would buy vinyl, they would see like, okay, what like generation vinyl is this? Because it would get worse. Every like I was reading
yeah,
a book and it was talking about like British versus English. I mean, British versus American acts, and they would send different generations of tape to each other, and so each had a lesser version of the other's acts, like because that would be how
interesting.
they would print the vinyl, so it like would sound way worse overseas. Um, and it's like, do you really want that, or do you want to just like get this is better than first generation? This is like zero generation.
Yeah,
It's it.
yeah. I mean,
That's what about
it's a
it.
weird thing. Like
Yeah,
there's a population of people and musicians and music fans too that like care about that, right?
yeah,
But
for sure.
I mean, there's an entire population
Totally.
in the world that could
I
give a fuck.
I
Like,
just feel like they're missing out. It's like adding like enough salt to your dish or something like that. It's like there's like another layer. If this is your favorite thing, like this is your favorite song, it's like, have you ever listened to it for real? Like in
yeah,
its
there's probably like
fullest.
a little bit more emotion in it
Right.
that you like. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's not to say
Little
that I
tiny
don't
more
love
feels.
I use streaming, like I love it. I love having access to sample things. Like that's awesome. But yeah, if I'm about this and I absolutely love it, I want that file. I want the highest res. I want to have that in
I
case, you
use
know, apocalypse, like I'll listen to that tune on my wave player or
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean, for the most part, I use Tidal because it
Cool.
kind of
Yeah.
touted itself as like
Hmm.
it had all the high res stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it. Um, so I'd love to kind of talk about your band and see you know kind of what you got going on. Anything that you'd love to promote. Have people come your way and listen to your stuff.
yeah. I mean, it's a band that we started in like 2005. Did it for a lot of years. Toured, did a couple of records, and then we
Cool.
kind of just
Capsule.
life stuff. Capsule is the band I'm talking about, and yeah, just life stuff started to happen, and we kind of didn't do that project
Yeah.
anymore for a while. Me
Uh-huh.
and some of the other guys in the band had another band for a period of time. We all just kind of ended up being the guys that play together. Like we kind of speak the same language, right? So
Love it.
we didn't do it for a long time. And when Colin, the other guitar player in the band,
Hmm.
besides myself, he started a project kind of in the pandemic. He had like a a collection of songs and was like, hey man, I kind of want to like record these. So he came to Miami. He lives in California now. He came to Miami and we kind of just me and him basically just did it as like a recording project.
Yeah.
And then once it was all done, this project was called Viral Sun. And once it was all done, like we wanted to play like a couple shows. So um, basically the other guys in Capsule ended up just being the band for it.
Cool.
So we played a couple shows as that, and then as we did it, we realized, like, man, we haven't done this in a long time. We love playing
Yeah.
with each other. Like we
Yeah.
do it very well together.
Yeah.
We're like, why don't we do some Capsule stuff? And we
Good.
started to get it. We got an offer to go play this fest in Gainesville called The Fest.
Cool.
There's like a big punk
Awesome.
rock music festival
Oh,
that
that sounds
happens
so
every
fun.
year in Gainesville, Florida. I think they're on like their 20th year, 25th
Cool.
year,
Cool.
something crazy. So we got offered to do that, and we were kind
Hmm.
of like, all right, yeah, let's fucking do that. And if we're gonna do that, like, we should like write and record a couple songs.
Totally.
So we did that,
I love it.
and they were released officially yesterday.
Dude, yesterday. What great timing.
Yesterday,
That's awesome.
yeah,
All right.
totally.
All right, yeah, so I'll definitely put that in the bio so people can check that out. I just have one last question for you, and this is kind of the thing that we do with everybody that comes on the show. So it's the show is called Love Music More. Segment's called Love Music Why. This is basically just your chance just to talk just poetically a little bit about like why do you love music? Why do you love doing this? What is it about, giving so much of your life to music that inspires you to, wake up the next day and do it again?
Man, that's a deep
That's
one.
a deep one.
I mean, I don't know. From a very early age, I just kind of became obsessed with music. I started playing guitar when I was like 8, 7 or 8. Like, I mean, I don't know. Music just made me, and everybody on the planet, hopefully, like it just made me feel, right? Like,
Mm. Yeah.
and I guess that's kind of addicting, right? Like the way music can make you feel, can
Yes.
make you feel all kinds of shit. It can
Yes.
make you feel like super hyped. It can make you cry. It can, you know, and I don't know. I guess I wanted to be a part of that
Hmm.
from an early age. Like I just knew I wanted to like be involved in whatever universe that like music is. And it initially started with like playing music and like learning
Hmm.
how to play and like trying to write songs and start forming bands, and it evolved into like now me helping other people like realize their artistic visions and
Yes.
make records. And like, I mean, I don't know, it's still just exciting every day, just being a part of music. It's like a magical thing. And like I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel a lot of the world, like doing music stuff, either playing or we didn't really talk about it, but I do a lot of live sound engineering. I tour with some bands, and um, yeah, I just went to China and India this last
Cool.
month
No
doing
way.
sound for this band Snarky Puppy, which is like
Oh
a
yeah. Totally.
pretty big jazz fusion group. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
monitors for them,
Awesome.
and yeah, I mean, literally the other side of the world,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
thousands of people coming to just watch those guys, which who are virtuosic,
Yes.
you know, musicians. Yeah, just whole other cultures, whole other side of the planet, like also love this music. Like love music. Music's everywhere in the world, and I think that's a beautiful fucking thing.
I agree, man. What's the difference doing, live versus studio? Like how is it just a very different perspective or is it kind of same things?
I try not. I try not to think of it
Yeah.
as that different. There are
Yeah,
different skill sets that you have to
for sure.
implement.
It makes
I
sense.
started in studio stuff, and then
Yeah.
moved into live sound. I feel like you don't have to pay attention. Somebody would probably like slap me for saying this, but I
Yeah,
feel a lot.
right.
I feel in live sound like you don't have to be as fucking detail oriented.
Hmm.
Where in studios, I feel like you are like a
Yeah,
kick drum. You're like,
microscope.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a microscope. Where I feel live, you're like, that shit sounds like a kick drum. It hits next.
Yeah. Yeah,
Moving
yeah,
on.
yeah.
You
Uh-huh.
know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
You fine tune stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, the live sound, I feel it's the same skill set of EQing and
Hmm.
using dynamic control to hold on to things, but then the other layer is just feedback.
Yeah,
And like we
feedback.
were
Yeah.
and like we were talking about like building a new studio and like
Right.
learning how the room sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Live sound is mixing whatever in a new room every single
Every
day.
single day.
And sound check has no people at it, and then the show has thousands of people at it, and then the
Right.
whole room sounds different.
Yeah. Whole bunch of bodies absorbing
Yeah,
that sound.
but
Yeah.
but you're implementing just the same general skills as like this needs to be brighter now because there's people here, so
Yeah. Okay.
EQ brighter.
EQ. Here we go. Exactly.
Shelf up. Here we go.
Shelf
Tilt,
up. Use that good here still.
tilt it
Awesome,
up.
Ryan. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot. Hopefully listeners did too. It was an absolute pleasure. And
Yeah, thank you for having me.
definitely check out your band. Also put in your website so people could link up with you and see the rest of your work. And let's definitely keep in touch. And I hope to make it out to your part of the country at some time very soon.
If you do, holla, man.
Yeah, I will, man. All right. Really appreciate it.
Peace.